name is Kayla, and today I'm going to talk about ESL in the United States and Wisconsin. This project was completed with Cassie, Krum, and Jessie. First, we're going to ESL in all of the United States. The top 10 spoken languages of ESL students include Spanish, as well as some languages and languages from all over the world, like German, Arabic, Russia, France, everything. Now we're going to take a look at a little graph of all ESL students in the United States. This is a little picture of all of the United States, and it shows that in Wisconsin there's around 114,000 students who are from immigrant families under the age of 18, and the percentage of these students is about 9% of all students in Wisconsin under 18. And the number of ELL learners is around 47,000. The state with the highest amount of English language learners is California. In California, there are about 4 million students that come from immigrant families, and that makes up about 50% of all students in their state. So 50% of their students speak a different language or from an immigrant family. And then that total number of students is around 1.5 million. It's a very large amount. The state with the smallest amount, which surprised me, was Mississippi. I thought it would maybe be Alaska. But in Mississippi, there's around 22,000 students that come from immigrant families. That makes up about 3% of their student population. And that makes up about 5,000 students that are English language learners, which is still a very large amount. Back to the presentation. The first law I'm going to talk about today is Law v. Nichols. This occurred in California in 1904. Basically, this law shows that 2,800 Chinese students came to California who did not speak English. Of that amount of students, only about 1,000 students received proper English instruction, meaning that students were support instead of being thrown stream classes where they were expected to either sink or swim. The outcome was that the U.S. Supreme Court guaranteed children an opportunity to a meaningful education regardless of their language background, so these students need support. Next is the Bilingual Education Act. This occurred in 1968. Basically, federal legislation provided funding to school districts to develop bilingual education programs, showing that literacy in 2 languages was very important. This was the first federal legislation to address the unique educational needs of students with limited English speaking abilities, or LEP. Next is the No Child Left Behind Act. This stated that ESL students same academic content and achievement standards as other students, so that these students must progress over time and not stay at the same language proficiency for a certain amount of years. In the Title III of this act, federal financial support was given to state and local educational agencies based off of the number of LEP students. So this would give extra support to students so that they could get better in their language abilities. And then standards and objectives are in place to ensure that the academic achievement is occurring. Next is the California's Proposition 227. This required that all public school instruction to be conducted in English and not their second language. Not their first language. This places students who are not fluent in English into special funded English immersion for a limited time, where they could really build up their English skills so that they could be placed into mainstream classrooms later. Students would then obviously be moved to a regular class, where they could partake in the same curriculum. Next is the formation of the bilingual schools in Dade County, Florida. This was created in 1981 by a group of bilingual educational instructors. They created the COBIS, or the Council of Bilingual Schools, because they want to maintain standards that would serve to guide and improve the education of children, mainly of Hispanic origin. So this is just a little quote from the website that we used, where they united to create an organization which would uphold the highest educational values of the Hispanic Americans who reside in the country. So that's more of a bilingual act. Next is the Arizona's Proposition 203. This is a lot like the California Proposition 227. It requires that all public schools in Arizona be instructed in English. Children not fluent in English are put into extensive one-year immersion programs where they can really learn the English language and then later be placed into a regular classroom where they would not need accommodations. The government and the public schools of Arizona have an obligation to provide children with the skills they need to become valuable members of society so that they may succeed and not have English as something that held them back. Next is the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1984. This is a revision of the Bilingual Act that I talked about earlier. It addressed the need of a more flexibility of the application of programs for LEP students so that they can find out what type of instruction works best, and it doesn't have to be one type of instruction. So this kind of goes against the whole direct instruction concept that we have learned about. It gave local school districts a greater voice in the decision process of how these students should be taught. And many grants were awarded for special programs so they could really find out what works best for these students, and it's not just one way or no way. Next was founding of the committee of TESOL. TESOL stands for Teachers of English Speakers of Other Languages. It was established in 1966. It was created out of concern to a professional organization bringing teachers together with the interest of teaching students with second languages because there wasn't a lot of research on this quite yet. So it was based off of 3 issues that have to do with teaching second languages. One issue is the need for professional organization dedicated to problems that at all levels of teaching English other languages. Next 4 is need of methodology journal to serve this profession so that you can have studies seeing what works and what does not work for English language learners in the process of second language acquisition. And the next is a need for a registry of specialists that would be helpful to government agencies and universities in their attempt to learn and research how to aid students who don't speak English. So the historical evolution of ESL. In 1839, Ohio became the first state to adopt the Bilingual Act, authorizing that there should be German-English instruction in schools. Next came Louisiana, which enacted an identical provision for French and English in 1947. From there, it went to New Mexico territories, where they wanted the same type of thing for Spanish and English. And it just slowly developed from there, where more states started adapting these kind of programs, and then soon it became not just one language with English, it became multiple languages with English. And like Wisconsin has now, we have 137 different languages that we teach. So, ESL students in Wisconsin. In 2012, it was found that 47,000 ESL students were served, and like we saw in that graph, it was a little bit more than that actually. The largest ESL population in Wisconsin is Spanish, and the second largest population is Hmong students. And like I just said, there's 137 different languages, which is a ton. ESL students are registered in 80% of the 424 school districts in Wisconsin, so almost all the school districts have ESL students. So how does the state deal with ESL students? Well, there's a variety of tests and programs that we use to help ESL students. The first is the Home Language Survey. This is a required survey given to parents of ESL students to see what kind of languages are spoken at home and to what degree. It is also used to see students' cultural and academic background. Next is the Access Test, or the WAPT test. Access stands for Assessing Comprehension and Communication in English, State to State. This is Wisconsin's initial English language screener and is taken once a year. The next test is the Access Test for ELLs. This is written from WIDA's 5 English language proficiency standards and is taken once a year. These categories include social and instructional language, language of language arts, language of mathematics, language of science, and languages of social studies. The next test is the WKCE test, and this is given to all students throughout Wisconsin. It stands for Wisconsin Knowledge and Concept Exam. This test is taken once a year, and students across the entire state take it, like I said. The test is administered to see how well students understand material in particular school subjects, and the results help the DPI determine the performance of schools to see if they meet the standards of the No Child Left Behind Act. The next is the TESOL and the WIDA programs, and these give ESL standards for proficiency that assess reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So what does the future of ESL instruction in Wisconsin look like? Well, there might be a great deal more of bilingual schooling, which means that teaching students in both their first language as well as English to promote literacy in both languages. These schools are normally separate from mainstream public schools, but they could make their way into public schools, depending on the school district. And this might help with students so that they can succeed in the real world because they have two languages that they can use. Next is direct instruction, which is kind of the opposite. And this is becoming more and more prevalent in school districts today because it started in Wausau and it's moving its way to other school districts. This is where teacher talk and activities are scripted, and instruction directly correlates with testing, like in the access tests or the WKCE test. And to the districts that use directed instruction, they say that it really helps, it proves that students are getting better in English. But there are also many other methodologies as well. So those are the things that could be happening in Wisconsin in the future. And these are the sources that we use for our presentation. Thank you very much.